You're living a lie. Every single day. Let's not sugarcoat it, you know it's true. You feel it in the pit of your stomach every time you force a laugh at a joke you didn't find funny. Every time you hold back your opinions to avoid an argument. Every time you tell yourself you're okay while ignoring the quiet ache inside. It's exhausting, isn't it? Pretending. Performing. Nietzsche would call this a tragedy. He wouldn't pity you, he didn't believe in pity, but he would challenge you. He'd say, do you see what you've done to yourself? You've traded your freedom for approval, your authenticity for comfort. You've buried the most honest parts of who you are to wear a mask for people who would never dare to take off their own. But let's dig deeper. Why do we do it? Why do we mold ourselves to fit the expectations of others, even when it hurts? The answer is simple: fear. We are terrified of being seen for who we truly are. What if we're rejected? What if we're judged? The mask is safer. It's easier. And so we wear it. But here's the problem. The longer you wear the mask, the more it becomes you. It starts to control you, dictating your choices, shaping your relationships, erasing your identity. And one day you wake up and realize you don't even know who you are anymore. All that's left is the mask. Have you ever felt that? The emptiness of pretending? The crushing weight of hiding? That's the cost of wearing a mask. Not just losing connection with others, but losing connection with yourself. But here's the twist. You don't have to live this way. What if I told you that there's a way out? A way to stop pretending, to take off the mask, and to finally live as your true self? It's not easy, and it's not for everyone. Most people are too scared to even try. But for those who are willing, the rewards are extraordinary. By the end of this journey, you'll understand why Nietzsche believed that becoming who you are is the most liberating and most challenging thing you'll ever do. And I'll show you how to start. Not with cliches or quick fixes, but with a solution most people don't even know exists. A way to reclaim your authenticity, your freedom, your life. So, if you're ready to stop hiding and start living, let's take that first step together. Part 1. Why we wear masks. The fear of being seen. No one starts out wearing masks. Think about a child. They laugh when they're happy, cry when they're hurt, scream when they're angry. Their emotions are raw, unfiltered. But then something happens. The world steps in. And it teaches them that being authentic, being real, can be dangerous. Imagine someone who trusted deeply only to be betrayed. That betrayal doesn't just leave a scar, it plants a seed of doubt. They begin to think, if I let people in again, they'll hurt me. So they create a mask of control. They micromanage relationships, overanalyze every detail, trying to prevent that pain from happening again. They tell themselves it's just being careful, but deep down, it's fear wearing a different face. Or take someone who was dismissed as a child. Maybe every time they spoke up, they were told, stop being dramatic, or nobody wants to hear that. Over time, they learned that their voice didn't matter. So they put on a mask of silence. They become agreeable, quiet, easy to overlook. They tell themselves they're just going with the flow, but inside there's a storm of words they're too afraid to speak. What about the person who was abandoned by a parent, a partner, a friend? That kind of loss doesn't just break your heart, it shakes your foundation. To cope, they might wear the mask of the people pleaser. They say yes to everything, put everyone else's needs before their own, hoping that if they're indispensable, no one will leave again. It looks like kindness, but it's a desperate attempt to fill a void. And then there's anger, the mask of anger. Picture someone who was humiliated, belittled, made to feel small. That wound festers, and instead of facing it, they cover it with rage. They lash out, keep others at arm's length, thinking, if I'm strong, no one can hurt me again. But beneath that mask is a fragile soul, terrified of being seen as weak. Do you see how this works? Pain doesn't just hurt, it shapes us. Emotional wounds become the foundation of the masks we wear. The betrayal that made you controlling. The rejection that silenced your voice. The abandonment that turned you into a people pleaser. The humiliation that made you angry. The irony is, these masks are born from a place of self-protection. They're not inherently bad, they're a response to pain. But the longer you wear them, the more they start to define you. And that's the tragedy. The mask that once kept you safe becomes a barrier, keeping you from truly connecting, with others and with yourself. Nietzsche saw this clearly. He believed that most people never confront their pain, they just cover it up. But by avoiding the wound, they miss the chance to heal. They live half-lives, trapped in performances, disconnected from their essence. And isn't that the saddest thing of all? To spend your life hiding the very parts of yourself that make you human, that make you you? 2. The masks we wear and the price we pay. Let's talk about the masks we wear, the ones we've become so good at putting on that we barely notice them anymore. They've been with us for so long, they almost feel like a second skin. But every mask comes with a price, and whether you realize it or not, you're paying for it every single day. Think about the mask of perfection. The one you put on at work, in your relationships, maybe even with yourself. You act like everything is under control, like you're thriving even when you're barely holding it together. You take on more than you can handle, refuse to ask for help, because admitting struggle feels like admitting failure. But the cost? Exhaustion. Burnout. That quiet voice inside that whispers, If they knew the real me, they wouldn't think I'm enough. Then there's the mask of the peacemaker. The one you wear when you prioritize harmony over honesty. You nod in agreement when you disagree, swallow your emotions to keep the peace, and let others make decisions that don't sit right with you, just so you don't cause conflict. But this mask costs you your voice, your boundaries, your truth. And over time, resentment starts to build, bubbling just beneath the surface. What about the mask of strength? You've seen it. It's the one worn by those who refuse to show vulnerability. Maybe you've worn it yourself. You tell everyone you're fine even when you're drowning. You laugh off pain, bury your emotions, and act like nothing touches you. Because somewhere along the line, you learned that vulnerability was weakness. But this mask doesn't just shield you from hurt. It also shields you from connection. It isolates you, leaving you with the haunting feeling that no one really knows you. And let's not forget the mask of achievement. This one's tricky because it often gets praised. You set goal after goal, chase accomplishment after accomplishment, thinking, when I reach the next milestone, I'll feel fulfilled. But it never works, does it? You get there and the satisfaction is fleeting. The applause fades. And you're left with that same hollow feeling because the mask of achievement wasn't about success. It was about proving your worth to everyone else. Here's the harsh truth Nietzsche would point out. These masks aren't just roles we play, they're prisons. Every time you wear one, you give up a piece of yourself. You trade authenticity for approval, connection for control, truth for comfort. And the saddest part? Most of us don't even realize it. We convince ourselves that the mask is who we are. But Nietzsche wasn't fooled. He saw these masks for what they are, defenses against the fear of being seen. Because being seen, truly seen, is terrifying, isn't it? What if people don't like what they see? What if you're rejected, judged, abandoned? So, you hide behind the mask thinking it will protect you. And it does, at first. The mask keeps you safe. But over time, it suffocates you. It separates you from the people you love, from the life you want, and most tragically, from yourself. Picture someone wearing the mask of the perfect parent. They do everything for their kids, sacrificing their own needs, putting on a brave face no matter what. But inside, they're drowning in guilt, in exhaustion, in the pressure to be everything for everyone. Or the ideal partner, always accommodating, always agreeable, afraid to express their true feelings because they don't want to rock the boat. They smile, they nod, but inside they feel invisible. These masks become habits, identities, prisons. And here's the painful irony. The more you wear the mask, the less anyone actually sees you. People fall in love with the mask, admire the mask, depend on the mask. But you, the real you fade into the background. Nietzsche believed that this is where most people spend their lives, in a performance. And he saw it as a kind of death. Because to live behind a mask is to deny yourself the one thing that makes life meaningful, the freedom to be you. But here's the question Nietzsche would ask you. Is the mask worth it? Is the protection it offers worth the cost of your freedom? Because the longer you wear it, the harder it becomes to take off. The mask starts to control you, and before you know it, you've forgotten what it feels like to live without it. The truth is, these masks aren't just a defense, they're a trap. And the first step to breaking free is recognizing how tightly they've bound you. So, let me ask you, what mask are you wearing right now? And what would it cost you to take it off? Part 3. The consequences of pretending, losing yourself. Let's talk about what happens when you spend your life behind a mask. Because make no mistake, there are consequences. Pretending to be someone you're not might protect you in the short term, but over time, it comes at a cost. And that cost is nothing less than you. Imagine waking up one day and feeling hollow. Like something is missing, but you can't quite put your finger on it. You've followed all the rules, played all the roles. You've been the good employee, the loyal partner, the supportive friend. So, why do you feel so disconnected? Why do you feel like a stranger in your own life? This is the inevitable result of pretending. Every time you wear a mask, you push a little piece of yourself into the shadows. The dreams you gave up to be practical. The emotions you buried to stay strong. The opinions you silenced to keep the peace. Over time, those pieces add up. And what's left is a version of you that feels incomplete. Nietzsche understood this better than anyone. He believed that most people live their lives asleep, following scripts written by others, too afraid to ask the question, who am I really? Instead, they hide behind masks, convincing themselves that this is just how life is. But deep down, they know better. Because the emptiness never really goes away, does it? Let's look closer at what pretending costs you. 1. The loss of authenticity. When was the last time you truly expressed yourself? Not the polished version of you, but the raw, unfiltered truth? For most people, it's been so long they've forgotten what it feels like. Pretending robs you of authenticity. And without authenticity, life loses its color. Think about the things you've held back. The risks you didn't take because you were afraid of failure. The words you didn't say because you were afraid of judgment. The parts of yourself you kept hidden because you thought, if they see the real me, they'll leave. Each of those moments is a tiny betrayal of who you are. 2. The creation of false connections. Here's the cruel irony of wearing masks. They're supposed to help us connect, but they actually isolate us. When you hide behind a mask, people don't see you. They see the role you're playing. And even if they like that role, it's not you they're connecting with. Think about it. How many of your relationships are based on the person you're pretending to be? That agreeable version of you. The successful version. The strong version. And how many people in your life actually know the real you? How could they, when you've been hiding behind a mask for so long? 3. The cycle of resentment. Pretending doesn't just hurt you, it poisons your relationships. Every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you suppress your feelings to avoid conflict, every time you sacrifice your needs for someone else's, a little seed of resentment gets planted. At first it's small, barely noticeable, but over time it grows. You start to feel unappreciated, unseen, taken for granted. But here's the hard truth. How can anyone appreciate the real you when you've never shown them? The mask protects you from rejection, sure, but it also makes genuine connection impossible. For the erosion of self-worth. This is the most devastating consequence of all. The longer you wear a mask, the more you start to believe that the real you isn't good enough. That you need the mask to be loved, respected, accepted. And once that belief takes hold, it's hard to shake. You start to question yourself. You second-guess your choices, your emotions, your worth. You tell yourself, I'll be enough when you get the promotion, when you lose the weight, when you've achieved whatever arbitrary goal you think will make you worthy. But the truth is, no amount of external validation can fill the void left by the parts of yourself you've abandoned. 5. The fear of being found out. Pretending creates a constant undercurrent of fear. What if someone sees through the mask? What if they realize you're not as confident, as capable, as happy as you seem? This fear keeps you trapped, forcing you to double down on the performance. And the cycle continues. The ultimate consequence, losing yourself. Nietzsche would call this a fate worse than death. To live behind a mask is to deny the very essence of who you are. Is to reduce yourself to a role, a performance, a shadow of your true potential. And for what? The approval of people who wouldn't recognize your true self if it hit them in the face? Here's the thing. The longer you pretend, the harder it becomes to remember who you are without the mask. It's like a house with too many layers of paint. Strip it all away and you're not even sure what the original looked like. But Nietzsche wouldn't leave you here, lost in despair. He'd challenge you to break the cycle. He'd remind you that it's never too late to reclaim yourself. Because beneath the mask, you're still there. Waiting, hoping, desperately wanting to be seen. The question is, are you ready to take it off? Or will you keep pretending, letting the mask dictate your life until there's nothing left of the person you were meant to be? Part 5. The path to freedom, taking off the mask. So here you are. You've recognized the weight of the mask you've been wearing, the ways it's shaped your life, your relationships, and your very sense of self. But now what? How do you begin the process of peeling back those layers and stepping into who you truly are? This is the most difficult part of the journey, but also the most liberating. Nietzsche didn't believe in half measures or easy solutions. He believed in tearing down illusions, no matter how painful, to reveal the raw, unvarnished truth of who we are. Because only in that truth can we find real freedom. Let's be clear. Taking off the mask isn't about abandoning your responsibilities or becoming some unfiltered version of yourself that disregards others. It's about aligning who you are with how you show up in the world. It's about authenticity, not perfection. Here's how you can start. 1. Radical self-honesty, the foundation of freedom. Nietzsche believed that self-deception was the greatest obstacle to freedom. Before you can take off the mask, you need to confront the lies you've been telling yourself. And this requires brutal, radical honesty. Ask yourself, what am I pretending not to feel? What am I pretending to be? What do I want but am too afraid to admit? For example, maybe you've convinced yourself that you're okay with a job that drains you or a relationship that feels one-sided. Maybe you've told yourself that your dreams don't matter, that your voice doesn't count, that you're not good enough. These are the lies that keep the mask in place. And until you name them, you can't break free from them. Self-honesty isn't about judgment or blame. It's about seeing yourself clearly, both your strengths and your flaws, and accepting what you find. Only then can you begin to move forward. 2. Reclaiming the shadow, embracing what you've hidden. Carl Jung, deeply influenced by Nietzsche, spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we've buried because we were taught they were bad or unacceptable. Your shadow isn't your enemy, it's your guide. It holds the parts of you that you've been too afraid to face. For example, if you've been suppressing your anger, your shadow might be holding the boundaries you've been neglecting to set. If you've been avoiding vulnerability, your shadow might be holding the connection you crave but fear. The parts of you that make you uncomfortable are often the very parts that will set you free. To integrate your shadow, you must be willing to sit with your discomfort. When emotions like jealousy, fear, or sadness arise, don't push them away. Ask yourself, what is this trying to tell me? What part of me have I been neglecting? 3. Challenge the fear of rejection. Why do we wear masks in the first place? Fear. Fear of judgment, of rejection, of not being enough. But here's the truth, rejection is unavoidable. No matter what mask you wear, not everyone will accept you. The difference is, when you're authentic, the people who do accept you are connecting with the real you, not the mask. Nietzsche would argue that this is the only connection worth having. When you stop seeking approval from others and start living for yourself, you stop being a slave to their expectations. You take back your power. The next time you feel the urge to hide behind the mask, pause. Ask yourself, what am I afraid of? And what would happen if I showed up as I truly am? 4. Start small, authenticity in action. You don't have to rip off the mask all at once. Start with small acts of authenticity. Speak up in a meeting when you'd normally stay silent. Say no to something you don't want to do. Admit when you're struggling instead of pretending everything's fine. These small moments of honesty build the foundation for a life of authenticity. Imagine telling a close friend how you really feel instead of giving a polite, surface-level answer. Imagine expressing a dream you've kept hidden because you were afraid of being laughed at. These moments might feel terrifying at first, but they're also where freedom begins. 5. Create your own values. Nietzsche believed that true freedom comes from creating your own values rather than adopting those imposed by society. This is the path of the Übermensch, the person who transcends conformity to live authentically. Ask yourself, what truly matters to me? What kind of life do I want to create? What am I willing to fight for, even if it's unpopular? Living by your own values requires courage. It means you'll have to disappoint people who expect you to follow the script. But it also means you'll start living a life that feels meaningful and true. 6. The power of vulnerability. Taking off the mask is an act of vulnerability. It means admitting that you don't have it all figured out, that you're not perfect, that you're human. But here's the paradox. Vulnerability isn't weakness, it's strength. It's the willingness to be seen as you are without guarantees of acceptance. When you embrace vulnerability, you open the door to deeper connections. You give others permission to be real with you too. And in that space, something extraordinary happens. You start to feel alive. The transformation. Imagine this, a life where you don't have to pretend, where you can express your desires without shame, set boundaries without guilt, and show up as your full, messy, authentic self. This is the freedom Nietzsche spoke of, not the absence of struggle, but the ability to face it without the weight of a mask. The path isn't easy. It requires courage, patience, and a willingness to confront parts of yourself you've spent years avoiding. But the reward? It's nothing less than becoming who you truly are. So, let me ask you, are you ready to stop performing? Are you ready to take the first step toward freedom? The choice is yours. But know this, beneath the mask is a version of you that's more powerful, more vibrant, and more alive than you've ever imagined. The only question is, will you let that person be seen?